Are you one of those dreaded console fanboys or fangirls? If so, we'll help you pick a winning side, or at least you know you have some good argument material on why you decided a specific console. Sorry Nintendo, you're not really in the console wars because you're already winning in our books. In this video, we'll be focusing on PlayStation and uncovering some dark secrets about the console. You won't believe what we have in store for you in the final slot. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that bell to keep up to date with all our new content. Without further ado, here are 9 dark secrets about PlayStation you had no idea about. They had a racist PSP advertisement? This ad appeared over 10 years ago, but it's still pretty shocking that, even back in 2006, Sony's marketing department completely let this thing slide through the cracks. The image was of a pale woman with white hair grabbing an African-American woman by the face, and she looks extremely angry as the ad itself says, "White is coming." We're not one to jump to conclusions, but it's kinda hard not to with this one. You probably wouldn't have seen something like this pop up in the United States because it was an advertisement which ran in the Netherlands, and it quickly drew a lot of controversy. Sony Computer Entertainment of Europe wrote a statement about the advert saying, "Whilst the image used in the campaign were intended solely to highlight the contrast between different colors available for the PSP, we recognize that the subject matter of one specific image may have caused concern in some countries not directly affected by the advertising. As a result, we have now withdrawn the campaign." Probably a good call. In all honesty, it was a pretty weak apology though. They could have done something which wouldn't have been so offensive, like make a polar bear and a Black Panther or something. Honestly, they probably could have went in any other direction with this campaign and been perfectly fine. Advertisements have been pretty controversial lately. It also includes H&M's latest coolest monkey in the jungle advertisement, which is currently under fire. Every year it seems like giant corporations put out some kind of advertisement that's just going to offend people, but after an extended amount of time, most people forget about it and continue to shell out $400 for PS4s or whatever else they're selling. Sony doesn't pay employers equally. You never want to work for a big corporation like Sony PlayStation because you might think, "Oh cool, I get a bunch of discounts and free PlayStation games," when in fact, the company discount is 35%, which isn't bad, and you get $10 to use every month on the PlayStation Store. That's all great and stuff, but you're probably not going to find many great titles for $10. When the Sony Pictures hack took place back in 2014, it was discovered Jennifer Lawrence was paid considerably less compared to her male counterparts in American Hustle and The Hunger Games. What was even more troubling about the email back when it was revealed, there was a staggering gender pay gap among Sony staffers as well. One of the emails contained a spreadsheet listing of 6,000 employee salaries, and 17 of the staffers were making upwards to $1 million, but only one of them was a woman. If you continue to look at the spreadsheet, the pay of the co-presidents of the production at Columbia Pictures also proved the gender pay disparity when Michael DeLuca was making $2.4 million and Hannah Minghella was paid $1.5 million for the exact same job. They both have been with the company for over 10 years, but they have now went in different directions, where DeLuca works for Universal and Minghella is with TriStar. Sony is one of the biggest companies in the world, and the fact that it can't pay men and women equally for the same job with the same amount of experience in 2018 speaks volumes about who's in charge there. Chinese students were forced to make PS4s for credits. Sure, we had to do a lot of really revolting things in college. Probably don't want to talk about it. Earmuffs, kids. Let's be honest, homework is for the birds, but some Chinese college students were forced into actual labor to get college credits. More than 1,000 Chinese college students were forced to manufacture the PlayStation 4 as part of their internship work at Foxconn factory. These students spent about 2 months at the plant and were told the internship was mandatory. Their diploma would also be withheld from them if they didn't participate in the internship. If they considered dropping out of this program, it meant they would lose out on all 6 credits worth of courses. So even though they were given other tasks beside this, they were also expected to sometimes perform manual labor. They were all paid the same of any Foxconn employee, which equaled out to $261 a month. The school these students attended ended up getting into trouble for forcing the students to work overtime, as well as overnight shifts, which was in violation with the company's policy. Also, we'd like to note this same plant came under fire when they were found to have used underage minors to make the Wii U. My goodness. After this came to light, Sony was forced to create the Sony Supplier Code of Conduct in 2015, which stated every supplier had to agree and adhere to the policies of the Sony Group to comply with all the applicable laws, work ethics, labor conditions, and respect for human rights, environmental conservation, and health and safety. That all seems super obvious. PS2 chips were linked to guided missile attacks. This turned out to be a complete myth, but we thought we'd mention it just because. If it were true, it would have been crazy. In late 2000, there were reports from both the media and the grapevine stating Saddam Hussein had been stockpiling a bunch of PlayStation 2 systems. He wasn't doing it because he thought it'd be worth a fortune in the future, but instead, people believed the more than 4,000 consoles that made their way to Iraq were meant to do some major harm. So how could a kid's toy cause any damage? Well, apparently. These rumors said Hussein had been hoarding PS2 systems for their chips, and fears began to grow. People had the idea that by stringing 10 to 20 of these consoles together, a supercomputer power enough to guide missile systems could be created. Yeah, it sounds like a complete hoax, and that's because it was. In reality, you could connect a series of PS2 consoles and then use the processors, but it would require a special feature Iraq would have needed years to develop after the PS2 debuted. In all honesty, maybe Saddam Hussein just wanted to play some Grand Theft Auto Vice City while he went into hiding. Not everything has to result in guided missile attacks. They tried to trademark Let's Play. In a weird epic battle between Sony Computer Entertainment of America and a bunch of YouTube Let's Play videos, the United States Patent and Trademark Office decided to rebuff Sony's complaint. Polygon also used the Let's Play trademark along with quite a few YouTube videos showing playthroughs of different games. Publishers of games had a complex and oftentimes controversial relationship with these videos, since many of them will be subject to YouTube's automated flagging system for copyright content. Of course, nothing became of it because of how complicated it would be to pull all these videos, creating revenue for thousands of YouTubers. Yeah, it would be a lot of hassle YouTube likely wouldn't want to deal with. Oh, and did we mention that in 2015, Sony had a number of paperwork problems which resulted in them flat out abandoning trademarks for The Last Guardian and Bloodborne, although they were later recovered, of course. So the games and the projects still get to live on with the company. We don't get Sony's weird fascination with coining certain terms to be their own. We kinda wish they'd realize fetch just isn't gonna happen no matter how hard they try to get it to. And yeah, we used a Mean Girls reference. You're welcome, Internet! The Sony Ericsson Xperia Play. Okay, so the real name for this little gem was the Xperia Play, and it was meant to be a smartphone that could shapeshift into a handheld game console. It was also produced by Sony Ericsson, so as much as we want to have high hopes for this device, they quickly sunk when we realized what the Xperia Play was actually going to be like. The early 2010s was marked by a rapid expansion for smartphones, since they could quickly download cheap games, but Sony's attempt to jam two very different devices into one turned out to be a major waste of time and a failure. Shocking. They probably should have just stuck with their handheld Vita and been happy, but no, they wanted to enter the mobile phone market with no real competitive product. Although the device was originally rumored to be the PlayStation phone, the company went in another direction, putting it under the Xperia brand, which would run off the Android operating system. The device didn't do very well in the market. In fact, by 2012, it was stated after following the same beta testing and developer discussions, the Xperia Play couldn't receive the Android 4.0 update because of stability concerns. The one redeeming factor was that since the phone ran on Android, it could install and play some great homebrew games. It could also run emulators for older game systems like the Commodore 64, Sega Dreamcast, and the Game Boy Advance, as well as many others. But we promise, if you didn't get the Xperia Play back in 2011, you didn't miss much. The PSX. The PSX never really saw the light of day, at least not in the Western market anyways. It was a Sony digital video recorder which had a fully integrated PS2 video game console built inside. It sounded pretty cool since it was designed to be a consumer video device which didn't even carry the usual PlayStation branding. The high cost of this device resulted in extremely poor sales in Japan. This meant the PSX would never be released outside the country. We definitely see why the PSX didn't make it far in Japan, as it came in two different choices, the 160GB model and the 250GB model. If you wanted the one with less memory, you were looking at paying around $700 or 79,000 yen, while the 250GB version would cost around $850. These are some pretty impressive numbers for the early 2000s, and most people weren't willing to spend that kind of money, and I don't blame them. The PSX was also the first device to use the X-Cross Media Bar graphical user interface, which would later be featured on the PS3 and the 2008 era Sony Bravia TVs. It's safe to say it was ahead of its time, and it was released almost 3 years before the PS3, but it was just a big bulky eyesore which became a commercial failure for Sony. So sad, so tragic. Consoles literally caught on fire. Even if you didn't own an Xbox 360, you probably heard about the red ring of death. In the PlayStation universe, we called it the yellow light of death, and you didn't want it to happen to your console, otherwise it was game over. Get it? Game over. It's a video game joke, guys. One lesser-known secret scandal in the PlayStation world was the PS3 overheating issue. That's why the PS4 had an overheat sensor put in place, because Sony couldn't have another PS3 incident on their hands. Both the Xbox and the PS3 were prone to overheating, and if these systems got too hot, which would usually be after years of overuse, the solders which would attach the CPU and the GPU to the motherboard would melt and break the connection. And sure, there were plenty of DIY methods to fix the problem, but wouldn't it be nice if these amazingly powerful consoles run as nicely as the PS4 and the Xbox One do now? Seriously, these consoles were in their 7th generation and they couldn't get it right. Luckily, they fixed their mistakes in the successors to those consoles. One of the PS3s even caused a major fire in someone's house, although the story disappeared, and when the link was searched for again, you would get an error 404 message. Props to you, Sony PR team, for a job well done. Leave a comment if you've ever experienced either of these problems with past generation consoles. If so, how did you fix it? The PlayStation was a failed Sony and Sega collaboration. Most of us may not remember PlayStation's humble beginning, but for those of us who do, it's not easily forgotten. The original idea was for Sony to collaborate with Nintendo on a joint venture to create a video game console. There were some major disagreements with licensing between the two companies, so they decided to kill the project altogether. But Nintendo didn't kill it. They stabbed Sony in the back and joined forces with Philips to design the Philips CGI. Because of this, Sony turned to Nintendo's rival Sega. Both Sony and Sega knew that the future of consoles depended on using CD-ROMs, but when they brought the idea of bringing the Sega and Sony hardware system to life, it was quickly vetoed by Sega's board of directors. This was what brought about the division between Sony and Sega, with Sega's president stating, "That's a stupid idea. Sony doesn't know how to make hardware. They don't know how to make software either. Why would we want to do this?" Sony ended up gaining Sega's senior executives like Steve Race to help develop the Sony PlayStation, while Sega moved forward with the Sega Saturn. Well, we all know how that turned out, as the Sega Saturn ended up launching for $400, which was $100 more than the Sony PlayStation. Let's just say it definitely wasn't a fairy tale ending for Sega, but it's been a sweet ride for Sony ever since. As you can tell, PlayStation and Sony have had quite their fair share of secrets. What's your favorite PlayStation console? Are there any dark secrets we may have missed? Let us know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and we hope you'll join us next time.
Here we go!